for, and we're just happy to be able to pull everyone together. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our lead consultants, Imogen Davis, and she'll take us from here. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I went ahead in my slides without meaning to. All right, so I am speaking with my team of consultants. We are strategic consulting and coaching based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. Our areas of practice are strategic planning, fundraising, community assessment, multi-sector collaboration, and really we're a full-service consulting firm for nonprofit and the local government sector. And it's just been a joy to work on this project. We're really excited to have had so many of you participate and to have you here today to discuss the results of our work. I do want to acknowledge our team. We have Renee Oswald Anderson here, who's one of the partners of SEC. You want to say hello, Renee?
Good afternoon. We're honored and thrilled to have worked on this project with all of you. We are passionate about youth engagement and youth work and the power of community voice in collaboration. So this has been a really exciting project for us to be a part of.
Thanks, Renee. And Carolyn Scherer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Like Renee and Imogen said, we are really excited to be presenting this project today and really thrilled to have had the opportunity to work with your community on this project. So thank you.
I just want to share a little bit about me. My background includes developing and managing large-scale community collaborations. And I could go on about that experience at length, but I won't. I facilitated various partnerships in communities in Minnesota that led to measurable results for the community, and was funded under drug-free community funds to mentor neighboring communities in setting up their own coalitions, and focused on coalition and collaboration in my master's degree work. So I have a passion for this. I really believe it can make a huge difference, and I'm excited for the work that you have done and will continue to do in that vein. So on the theme of collaboration, I'm going to turn over for a minute to Brandon, who, as Lee said, is our youth advocate and has been just a fabulous team member on this project.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. So I want to start off with this quote: "Imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change." I'm very fortunate to be able to be at the table in the Zoom call tomorrow, meeting with so many people who are all on the same boat and have been making huge difference and impact in Frederick for many years. And so when you think about imagination shared and how when we all could come together and share imaginations without limits, that creates so much opportunity for that collaboration. And through these months, I've had the opportunity to not only just speak to the adults who run programs and hear things from them, and that's great, but the true collaboration for me was actually hearing the kids' opinions about what they wish and envision for a building. Because what good is our collaboration if we don't bring the voices of the people we aim to serve and aim to build something for, if their voice is not as loud, if not louder, than the adults who think they know what they're doing all the time, right? So and when we come together and everybody's at that table, the community truly will create social change. So I'm excited to share with you guys some of the things that we've heard from our youth, and excited to just continue building upon this and looking to make some change and inspiration with everybody on this call.
Thanks, Brandon. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next slide. There we go. And so there is a huge amount of community support for expanded collaboration and for the development of a youth center. And we summarized our findings, or our assessment findings, into 6 key statements, and I'm going to start on the first 3. So young people are super excited. They love the idea of a youth center, especially one that they can be part of designing and leading. And they had lots and lots of ideas and recommendations, and Brandon's going to be talking about that more a little later on. There's an incredible amount of strong support for expanded, formalized collaboration, really bringing the whole community together. And we gathered that information through surveys and interviews of, well, probably 50 community leaders and nonprofit leaders. And providers themselves are excited about the prospect of a youth center. We need that to really be a win-win for all of our youth serving agencies, one that creates opportunities for youth and opportunities for program expansion and for participants to be coordinated around common goals for the community and for the youth that they serve. So who did we hear from? We heard from lots of folks, 45 youth service nonprofits, primarily executive directors, but also program staff, 60 youth and young adults, many school district representatives. We were super excited to be able to work with government leaders from public health, from Parks and Recreation, and folks from the giving community. So, and various people, both in national affiliate nonprofits such as the Y or Boys and Girls Club, but also a number of much smaller organizations and grassroots organizations. So, you guys are starting with a really strong foundation. I mean, what was clear to all of us, as we worked and interviewed people was that there's just so much great work going on already. There's a huge amount of care around youth and about youth development and about youth leadership and how that can be fostered and developed. Many programs and services. We spent a good deal of time talking with folks who are working around the impact of trauma and adverse childhood experiences, which is what that ACEs word stands for. Really some cutting edge work going on in the community there from your health providers, as well as from public health, and some great data that we were able to tap into as we looked at this study. And then lots of folks working at the community level to make an impact in the best way that they know how, right in their own community, in their backyards. So just, it's just a beautiful thing. Yeah, and really growing from passion and deep caring. That being said, the belief, my experience with collaboration and what we learned from everybody who participated in this project says to me, yes, there are opportunities to have even a greater impact. And there's this willingness to invest in a building, potentially in the development of management infrastructure and providing a shared space for youth. There's this strong interest in a more formal, broadly based collaboration around youth outcomes, in deeper and more empowered youth engagement. And through that, one of the things, this is a bit of a sidebar, but I think there's this opportunity through this work to create dual track programs that engage older youth in being leaders in programs for younger youth. All right, so we're going to talk about infrastructure, focusing on organizational and building needs. And this picture is actually of a youth center that was recently constructed in Ashland, California. It's called the Reach facility. And it's run by Alameda County Healthcare Service Agencies and the Center for Healthy Schools and Communities. And you'll see as Brandon goes through what some of the youth were asking for, but this was also developed with a ton of youth engagement and includes a library, a dance studio, a digital media arts center, computer lab, gym, career development, and employment. And I know there's been talk of a vision of a youth campus, and this is actually part of a larger youth campus that was developed on a brownfield site that includes sports fields, a gymnasium, and a community park. So kind of a cool example, and they just recently completed it. So we went through a visioning process with a group of nonprofit providers, and we used a process that allowed people to really say, you know, what would this look like in 3 to 5 years if we could do everything we think we might be able to do. So people talked about having this shared collaborative space that meets youth needs holistically. And that includes ways to meet basic needs, such as food, linking them to shelter, and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And a web of coordinated and caring supports. I love the word web. You know, it's like really capturing and holding, cradling even youth as they are journey to explore. An inclusive and open door for everyone. No one would feel marginalized. No one would feel unwelcome. And a place that is safe, warm, fun, comfortable, and accepting. That offers a really wide variety of programming. So this is, these aren't my words or Renee's words. These are the words of the folks that participated in this process of really, you know, answering the question, what would be your vision? And we looked at what kind of space will allow this vision to become reality. So both in our one-to-one interviews and in the visioning process, we heard providers talk about truly versatile spaces that could be larger than typical classrooms, that could have a range of offerings that weren't, you know, really could be adapted to a number of different purposes. The same thing with space and equipment. People talked about everything from STEM work to performing arts to drop-in spaces to recreational activities, school liaisons, mental health services. So having the kind of space that can be adapted to multiple purposes was really important. And folks talked about a hub and spoke space configuration. So you could kind of see that actually in the Ashland picture, where there's that center atrium and then everything, it comes off that central gathering space. So, so not only did folks who took part in this process recommend that, but if you look at the literature on what kind of space works best for the development of youth centers, you see a lot of this hub and spoke recommendation. And then the connectivity in today's world is clearly important for Wi-Fi and for the technology for people to learn and use data and move technology careers forward, be creative with video and so forth. So as providers spoke, and especially our smaller providers, were really excited about the possibilities for organizational capacity building in this space, that it could provide them with additional programming space for training, that could be potentially jointly organized and coordinated, and that having that shared space would allow for an ease of collaboration that isn't currently in place. We just know it's easier to collaborate with people when you see them on a regular basis. And then there was this idea that there could be the potential for shared business services for nonprofits, which is a concept in play in a lot of places around the country, not necessarily in a youth center, but I know in the Twin Cities Metro where we are housed, there's several of those shared business service organizations that offer backroom services for a number of nonprofits. All right, put up our imagination quote again, because the next part of the presentation is talking about youth and youth engagement and what youth had to say. The person who from whom this quote comes is obviously a writer and also a conservationist. One of her best known book is, I think, called Finding Beauty in a Broken World. So look her up, Terry Williams. All right, so Brandon, as our youth advocate, is going to speak to what we learned from youth as part of this process.
Yes. So as you can see in the picture, it says genuine youth engagement is critical to success with the center, right? So what we did is we just went to where the youth were in their natural habitat, right? If that was going to a school, we got them in the school where we got to meet and give them lunch, feed the kids, get them ready to imagine, right? And every place we went, the centers I went and spoke to, the kids were so ecstatic to truly be a part of something like this. So the young people are really excited about the center, and that they actually, there actually seems to be adults who really want their input. They kept on sort of saying that, like, man, you guys really want our input? That's pretty cool, right? So they're ready to give their input, and not only just their input, they're ready to take leadership. And that's with our cues. So some recommendations and programs and services they had is, of course, food, right? All of us were teenagers. If you've had kids, the first thing you want to do when you come out of the school is go eat something. So that is essential with working with anybody. I mean, Google feeds all of their clients all the time, right? My supervisor's on here, Miss Ann, we need food in the refrigerator, okay? No, I'm just playing. But yeah, so food, access to employment and housing, just supports for it, mental health support. They were really looking forward to having a hub where they could sort of find themselves in the midst of this life that could be chaotic. So all these things that they're saying are the things that they believed is needed. So mental health support, a relatable and supportive staff members who understand the culture in which the kids come from, staff members who understand the lingo, with staff members who could also guide and lead kids down avenues to receive help from all the different nonprofits that could potentially fill this building, right? Youth leadership opportunities. Our youth are ready to take ownership and really be a voice and take leadership in developing this program, not even just a program, but developing that peer mentor type of things the students talked about. Venues that celebrate and showcase youth's work. And I'm so glad they said that, because we just need to celebrate more as a community, right? So a place for celebration, a place for where we could showcase, the kids could showcase the work, and life skills programming, from basic bills to how do I deal with an annoying spouse, right? How do I handle my anger? All these things that our kids and that we have to live with every day. We go to the next slide. So youth recommendations. Programming should include a variety of enrichment and advancement opportunities. So not every kid is an athlete. Not every kid is into painting. And not every kid is into giving back in community service yet, right? There's so many things that this center can provide for our kids to open their eyes to see the benefits of it. So the center, they're saying, needs to be filled with a whole bunch of variety of different things. So kids can walk in and find themselves connected to some way, whether that be video game, having spaces, just a quiet space for studying, receiving tutor help, and of course, all of the arts, maybe a dance class, arts class, a place for them to find themselves. Yes, so youth, the building space. I remember, and I think this was at Tuscarora High School, one of the SGA members was speaking about having like a space where it's like a campus, and the way that he just spoke about this space and how it could flow and make sure that age groups were in areas where they, I don't know, 12-year-old to 14-year-olds would sort of be, 17 to 18, 20-year-olds would sort of be. So they spoke about creating all this stuff. So this is just some of these things: study space that includes tutoring, computers, of course, Wi-Fi, school counselors. This would be a great place for some of our school counselors to connect every once in a while. And of course, GED support, any type of job training. Yeah, we could go on to the next slide. I saw the music room. Music room is huge. We have so many musicians. Frederick is an artsy place. Let's keep it artsy by investing in our youth and giving them avenues to do that, right? All right, so support for transition to post-secondary. Must have people or staff that can help youth get where they want to go, help them find the right path and make the proper connections. And that is key. So really, they were real big on, it's cool to have a big building and like it look nice, but if the people who are inside of that building that we have to see when we walk in aren't approachable people, aren't people who aren't going to be afraid to step past a barrier. This is going to be teenagers who have attitudes and have issues, right, that they don't know about yet. And it's hard to get over all those things to get to a team. So we need somebody who's really looking forward to connect that way. And they spoke heavily on that. So making sure that we man and we staff this location with somebody who truly understands the mission and the vision of what the center could provide. And then do I have one more slide on my?
Yep.
Is this the last one? All right. Sorry.
Yes.
All right. So supports for transition of post-secondary, job readiness preparation, whether that is just more exposure to some of the programs that FCC has, but really a place where the kids are coming in, where they could get some job readiness skills or preparation or be pushed in that right way. Employment or internship opportunities at the center. So having the concession stand ran by possibly our youth, having some of the mentoring programs ran by or staffed with some of our older youth who are mentoring back, our 18, 19-year-old youth mentoring back to 12-year-old. Help with job applications, resumes, setting up for direct deposit. All these normal things that when you get a new job, you're like, what is a account number? What is all this stuff? Which sometimes could be a hurdle, which would prevent someone from even taking on that job, even if they get it, just because they don't know what to do or know where to turn to. So the easiest thing for them to do is walk away. And I think the big thing is that job and internship connections. And that's where a lot of everybody on this call and the rest of the Frederick plays a huge part in this collaboration. The youth saw that in order to be ready to transition to their next phase of their life, they're going to need help from connections from other people. And that's through the jobs, through internship opportunities that a lot of businesses, hopefully here in Frederick, can provide.
Thank you, Brandon, for all of that. We really also have a narrative report that we're going to be releasing soon that goes into even more detail than what we're showing you today in terms of the findings. And especially this next section, I didn't want to bog us down with, tons of graphs and and such. So I'm going over this pretty quickly without a lot of in-depth data analysis, but trust me, there's plenty of that in the narrative report. So if you are wondering where did that come from, or how did we find that information, well, you can ask me, but you will also see it in the report. So, many of you are not going to be surprised to learn that, there's multiple sources of data showing there's groups of youth who are at high risk of poor educational and employment outcomes. While there's a lot of strength in the community, I mean, you look at your overall high school graduation rate, for example, which is 94%, I think, when I looked at it, which is a great number. There are disparities, and I'm sure you're well aware of what some of those are. Youth of color, youth who have experienced homelessness, youth who have experienced multiple ACEs, really stand to benefit from this more coordinated approach. And I think at one point somebody asked, well, who is this youth center for? And that's a great question. And I think, it's for the youth that want to use it. But I think when you look at it from the standpoint of who will benefit the most and how will the community grow the most, and will be reaching those youth who do have experienced that trauma, who have experienced adversity, and can benefit the most from having these coordinated assets and activities and experiences and relationships available. And so as we looked at, how will we know that this makes a difference? One of the key factors in really unlocking how this makes a difference is this emphasis on developmental relationships, and I'll get into it a little bit more as we go further down the slide deck here. But that piece, developmental relationships are a term coined by the Search Institute and backed up by a lot of research, and they have specific characteristics. And the youth center, as well as collaborative work throughout the community, can really look hard at how are we doing that, how well are we doing that, and how is it impacting our outcomes. And I think, as Brandon alluded to, being able to recruit and retain the staff that can provide these relationships and sustain these relationships in today's labor market is a challenge. So that will really be dependent on being able to, of course, pay them competitively and provide benefits and provide meaning and community in their workplace. But at the same time, youth have huge, as huge strengths and assets: resilience, persistence, curiosity, this drive to explore new activities and experience, and many of them are very engaged in the community. At the same time, many youth face challenges. So I'm going to get into a little bit more of the data on the challenges. We talk about trauma or adverse childhood experiences. So let me go back. The Maryland Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which was last conducted, I think, in 2020, but we weren't able to, or 2021, but the results have not been distributed yet. So we were able to pull from the 2018 results. So they are a little bit old, but anyway, they do ask about 4 different adverse childhood experiences. And from that data, we're able to see that, and an analysis done by the State of Maryland Public Health or Department of Health, we're able to see that about half of Frederick's youth have experienced 1 or more ACEs. Economic challenges. The United Way here has done a lot of work on what they call ALICE, asset limited, income constrained. And according to that latest report, 49% of households of color are ALICE, and 37% of households overall, which means they really only have enough money to survive. They don't have the extra money to do some of these things that youth are so hungry for. Mental health, substance abuse, food insecurity. And food insecurity is a key factor. I mean, Brandon talked about food, and, you know, of course, we all love food, but when people are food insecure, it affects their lives in other ways. In fact, students who report being food insecure are also much more likely to report using illicit drugs, for example. We'll get into the specifics of that. So it has beyond being an attractive feature, it has a core purpose. It's really important to say out loud that many of these disparities are the result of systemic racism. Otherwise, you know, we can assign consciously or unconsciously other reasons for these disparities. And, you know, we could do a whole course on this topic. But this is another reason why it's especially important to ensure that all youth have access to and participate in high quality youth programs. And that's going to require intentional outreach and reducing barriers to participation to reach youth of color and low income youth. I'm going to take a sip of water. So the data on trauma, if you're not familiar with it, it's so compelling. And just to, in the simplest form, the analysis of the Maryland Youth Risk Behavior Survey data for Frederick County and many other sources of data that you can read about from across the country show that students who have been exposed to childhood trauma are much more likely to engage in risky behavior and to have poor health and educational outcomes across their lifespan. But what's really amazing is that these relationships, the relationships with caring adults in youth, can decrease the likelihood of those risky behaviors and mitigate the effects of ACEs. So it's really powerful. It's just giving me goosebumps right now, just even saying it. So here's one example of that. And we have many more in the report. And if you're interested in this topic, you could seek out a plethora of examples. So when we look at that data, about a third of Frederick High School students report feeling sad or hopeless almost every day in the 2 weeks before the survey. And in a cross-tabulation, looking at how do these students who are sad and hopeless, what are their other experiences? We learn that among those students, those who report experiencing one or more adverse childhood experience, such as having a parent incarcerated, living with a parent who is verbally abusive, or an adult who's verbally abusive, or one who abuses substance use, then the rate was 30% higher. So nearly about 40% of students who report one or more adverse childhood experience felt sad or hopeless almost every day in 2 weeks before the survey. But here's the key: when those who reported having one or more of these experiences, but reported that they had support from adults in their lives, the rate was 40% less. So having that opportunity for the development of relationships with caring adults and bringing those students who are experiencing this adversity to a place where they can experience that is going to have a big impact. So the Search Institute identified 5 elements, and again, there's a lot more to this than we have time for here. But the research shows that these 5 elements, when you put them together, expressing care, challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding possibilities for youth, are much more likely to be resilient in the face of challenges in their lives. And when they look to see, well, how many young people today around the country are experiencing these relationships now, 22%, so like 1 in 5, they didn't experience any of the 5 aspects of a relationship like this. And another 18%, so again, almost another 1 in 5, said they only experienced 1 of these aspects. And the providers in our work here in Frederick echoed this importance. Youth will come to a center for the relationships and for the recreational and enrichment opportunities, but it's on this foundation of trust and relationships that services and supports can then be offered. And I think this just really sums it up well. So you heard from Brandon, what are all the things that youth would love to see that they would come to do, and the people that they would want to relate to. And this is the foundation of trust. And then the pieces that can support them through their challenges can be offered. Somebody else said, I think a youth center can be effective, but we've seen the greatest impact on youth is through relationships. Buildings create environments for relationships to blossom. You need trained, caring adults to step into those voids. You know, and let's be clear, we know that many of you are stepping into that void every day already. But how can we expand that in a more intentional way is the question. So this kind of sums it up, right? It can be a place where young people can experience the power of these relationships and have those critical webs of support. All right, so I'm going to go back into needs for a minute. We talked about food security earlier, and I think this is really key. So about 1 in 3 are living below the ALICE threshold. And this said more than half because and 49% is not more than half. We just updated that statistic. So it should be about half live below the ALICE threshold. And about 100 students or 1,000 students are reported homeless each year by Frederick County Public Schools. So that's a lot of young people who are potentially influenced by not having enough to eat. And again, we heard that from the youth. Open the kitchen. Let us make our own food. Let us understand how to put meals together. And speaking to economic need, nobody in this community can afford to pay $200 for ballet classes. There's a gap in what wealthy students are experiencing and what students with fewer resources and families with fewer resources are experiencing. Let's see, I got ahead of myself a little bit. Let me go back just for a second. Just want to say that on food security, I keep promising to say this. So 25% of youth with one or more, who had experienced 1 or more ACEs, so trauma, who were also food insecure, misused prescription drugs. That's 1 in 4. And you all know how risky that behavior is and how youth are dying from misusing prescription drugs. So for those who were food secure, even who had experienced some trauma, the rate was about 16%. That's a big, big gap. And likewise, we saw food security lowering the prevalence of mental health issues, using tobacco, or getting into fights at school. So that access to food is really identified as a critical piece. So all of this really speaks to the clear need for also having not only recreational activities and those relationships, but using those as a bridge to provide health services and physical activity, access to care. All right, so now we're going to talk about collective impact. So this is a sort of a catchphrase that's been around now for, I don't know, a good 10 years. It's coined by a guy named Mark Friedman, who came up with something he called the results-based accountability framework, and published his research in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. And we define collective impact as the commitment of a group of actors or people from different sectors to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem. So a very structured form of collaboration. And when you're engaged in doing collective impact work, you want to have a sense of how is what we're doing getting us to where we want to be? What are the outcomes that we're working towards? And we, together with a group of providers and youth workers, developed a much more fleshed out theory of change that you'll see in the final report. So it's a lot of detail. This is a very, very nutshell version. But when the community works together and you have relationships that matter, activities that appeal, youth are engaged, there's a friendly and accessible location. And those relationships and activities reduce risk, provide service links, and you can see underneath that we have those developmental relationships, the basic needs are met, all the things that we've just been talking about. Then we can start to look at outcomes. An increasing number and percentage of youth participate in all levels of community decision making, engage in self-discovery and opportunities to explore, experience safety and belonging in the community, succeed academically, are prepared for post-secondary education or training, and are healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally. So then, you know, you can look at those and you can see that each one of those outcomes could have its own set of strategies in the framework of collaboration, of which the Youth Center can be a part. But you can work towards those in all across the community with various partnerships and strategies and tactics, and look to your sources of data, some of which I've been quoting, like your youth risk behavior survey, your provider data, your school district data, to discover whether or not you're making progress towards those outcomes. So, you know, people said, well, we're at least some folks said, you know, we're collaborating a lot. We collaborate with this agency and that agency and the city on this, and I am sure that that's the case. So this little picture just shows, you know, I'm here and I'm collaborating with these different organizations, and you know, these might even be joined up, so there's some overlap. So people are connected through this web, but this is not what we're talking about when we're talking about systemic collaboration. And we're really talking about how do our big players, as well as our youth service program providers and youth themselves, have aligned objectives that can lead to amplified impact. So we really want to you'll see again in the larger report, I took a look at, what are the priorities of the Office of Children and Families, which is, part of Frederick County. Communities are safe for children, youth, and families is one of their objectives. Families are safe and economically stable. Youth have opportunities for employment or career readiness. Youth complete school. So right there, there's huge alignment here between the work that has been started through this process, the ideas that are being floated in terms of what a youth center can do. The city of Frederick has a strategic plan. It has many objectives, but a few that align with this one are to support neighborhood accessible arts and recreation opportunities, infrastructure, and programming. Maintain and expand programs that serve the most vulnerable populations, and reduce health disparities, achieve equal access to preventative services. It just lines right up. I'm not going to go through all of these, but there's also a great deal of alignment with school district priorities, the funders work group, trauma-informed Frederick. So lots of alignment already. And just to re-emphasize this point, right? People are ready for this. 84% believed expanding collaboration was important. The question that we asked was, how could youth providers in this area work together more effectively? And people gave narrative answers, and then we went through and coded those answers to see what the themes were. So how do we do this? How do we pull people together? And you all know it's easier said than done. Like, okay, we're going to work together. But there is research on this, and to make collaboration sustainable and work for all of the people that are involved. So this first one is really about I'm sure you've heard this phrase, nothing about us without us. It's really about that. It's critical. The second point, the research on effective coalitions shows that structure is key. Folks feel like sometimes, well, we don't want to bother with that. It's not that important. And in the work that I have done, for whatever reason, I was always a stickler for structure, because I felt like if people didn't have a clear framework through which to work, it just led to confusion and sort of going through circles. Like, what are we here to do? And what is our power to decide what to do? What's our scope of action? So having that jointly agreed upon charter that ensures representation, defines who's at the table, who makes decisions about what, and how those decisions are carried out in a formal way. So it doesn't mean that it has to be, the U.S. Senate. Like, we don't have to have a huge amount of complexity of rules. And you can aim for consensus, but sometimes in order to move forward, you need to be able to vote. And again, this transparency, making all meetings public and allowing for public input. So again, these are research backed, in a literature review, 5 indicators of effectiveness. or this formalization of rules, leadership style, member participation and membership diversity, agency collaboration, and group cohesion. And I think that last one, group cohesion, is really around knowing what you're working towards and having passion towards that outcome that you're working towards together. Naming systemic racism as a cause for disparities in health and achievement. Developing and using anti-racist language and backing it up with action. Being intentional and being positive. And this last one, again, is structural. Have a backbone organization to support the work of collaboration. People coming into a collaboration already have full-time jobs. To run the collaboration and make it move forward, it's really important to have some resources. So a backbone organization is keeping the books, is providing the HR policies for the project manager, is providing office space, and is supporting the joint work of the community. In the course of the year, you know how these things are. Things get around the community, and we sort of started to get some hearsay back, like certain people didn't necessarily feel included in this process. And we held one meeting where we really made an effort to reach out to those very, very people and ask them, what do you think that the barriers are here that could prevent this full participation from everybody in the community? People spoke about some lack of trust. So there's some trust building to be done. Sort of the fragmentation of data to support collaborative efforts or measure success objectively. And there are solutions to that. I mean, as well as using larger community data sets that I already referenced, like the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and others as a starting point. You can, over time, develop integrated data. And some folks felt there was a hesitancy in the community about larger scale communication, collaboration. So again, to overcome this clear decision making, having a framework of supporting continuous improvement and learning. So it's not a punitive environment where, boy, if I don't reach this outcome, something bad is going to happen, or I'm not doing a good job. We're all in this together. We're all learning together. And we're learning in order to make our practice better. And we're providing training on facilitative, collaborative leadership. Creating that common base of knowledge, which we've started doing, you have started doing by participating in this project. And for our funders to develop funding strategies that support collaboration, there's a lot of literature in the philanthropic world about how do we do this? How do we, because it's a little bit more complex than funding a program, how do we create funding streams that really encourage and support large-scale collaboration? So these conditions for collective impact. So when we don't have collective impact, we have more specialized agendas. We're all doing our own measurement, a lot of independent activities, which, let's be clear, people don't have to give those up altogether. There's sporadic communication about outcomes, and efforts aren't supported. To have that collective impact, you have a common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and a backbone organization to really keep things going. So that last one, I want to just talk a little bit more about that. To why the backbone? There's a gap, right? Many multi-sector collaborations excel at vision and then fail in execution. It's not easy, but it's the hard reality of the daily grind. So having that staffing piece is critical to keeping things moving forward, the right kind of leadership. It's not out front leadership, but it connects the dots behind the scenes. Who's making those calls? Who's finding out, what's the problem? How do we make this work for you? How do we move this forward together? How does this language work? What should our agenda be? All that work is what keeps things moving forward. Consistently letting people know, here's what we're doing, here's the progress we're making, here's what we met about, here's what you can participate in. And what is our return on investment? What is the value? What is the value for community? And continuously working to bolster that narrative and also that reality. So, and again, coordinates that execution of strategies, when it takes those extra pieces of work that somebody else would be adding to their already full plate. You need another plate to fill up, so to really coordinate the execution of strategies and partnership initiatives that are developed. And in the case of the vision here, there's a whole piece of also managing a building potentially and a space under which these strategies and specific partnerships are also taking place. So a little bit about data. People talk about data, but there's a lot of different kinds of data. It can be used for a lot of different purposes. And again, I'll refer you to our full report, which includes some more information about this. So public reporting is, what are the accomplishments of our collaboration, of our work so far? Do we have a dashboard? How is our community doing as a whole? So that's really population and systems level data. How do we know which strategy is more important than another one? Helping to inform what we should focus on and what strategies contribute. Program evaluation, what programs are effective? What local programs are increasing student well-being or achievement? How can we bring those to scale or duplicate them in lots of different places? So, and then service coordination and delivery case management, people often think of this one when they're talking about shared data. And this is probably the hardest one because it involves sharing individual level data, which, for as many of you know, is not always shareable, and for good reasons. There's a lot of regulatory apparatus around individual data, whether it be health data or educational data. So it can be done. Places have done it, but that's a long-term project. Some of these others are easier as you start out. Looking at continuous improvement, again, that non-punitive mindset. If I've changed something, has it made things better? How do I know that? And then just sharing data to local partners. What are the enrollment characteristics of my program? What are the needs of my target population? How am I meeting that? How does that inform your work? So lots of different ways in which data can be used. So, there's lots of reasons to embark on this work in a more structured way and to pursue the youth center as part of that strategy. Knowing how much you care about youth, but even when you look at dollars and cents, and these statistics came from, I think, the state of New York After School Alliance, when they looked at publicly funded out of school programs with a relatively minimal investment per student, 3,200 annual spend per student, and looked at, what are the costs down the road that could potentially be saved if we support a student so that they can graduate, if we provide those relationships and can coordinate those services so that students who have experienced trauma don't go down a road of misusing substances. The public return on investment is really, really significant. So all of these bullet points here have, when you look at the research on effective out-of-school programming, you can see correlations with all of these variables and data points. So you may be wondering, well, what are our next steps? And again, we have laid out some recommendations in the full report, and we are, it's not up to us to say what should your next steps be exactly for you to determine. I thought this model of change was a useful one to think about. So to grow youth services for children and youth, that increasing the capacity for change, and you've already been doing that. This process has been part of that. So that's, another reason why those backbone support and the understanding of how collaboration works, and how, when you focus on outcomes and focus your strategy on outcomes, the using effective and evidence-based means you can improve children and youth outcomes. But it's a long-term proposition. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It takes a little while to see it. And so that's another reason why having that support, so that you're going to be able to sustain the work, because that's where you're going to see those results. So they're saying here 5 to 10 years. You might be able to see some results sooner, depending on how laser focused you are on certain things. So we laid out this timeline as kind of a, an example timeline that you could consider. The structure that we recommended, and I'll get to it in the next slide, involves a leadership council, as well as excuse me, a youth collaborative advisory council and a community advisory council. So we looked at, really convening that group in the next couple of months, working on the convening, the backbone organization, the staff roles, and then even with all this work that's been done, a strategic planning process is going to be critical, because it's a long-term proposition, and you want to set those milestones for, where are you going to be, what are you going to do this year to get you to the next stage, and what's going to happen in year 2, and building on the theory of change work and the assessment work that's already been done. And then so I think at the end here, Lee's going to talk a little bit more about this, but this is something that's, people can step up now and talk about their willingness to participate in this work and take part in this timeline. So here's a little graph of based on several different examples and my experience with community collaboration, having this leadership council of your sort of C-suite reps, because people who have decision-making power are critical. At the same time, people who have their experience in the community and are working with youth and are in neighborhoods and in communities every day their voice needs to be heard as well. Youth, we've already talked about how critical youth is. And then to have some staffing so you can continue to move things forward and get that behind the scenes work done. Okay, we're almost done. So forming a leadership council, forming an advisory council, and a youth council are really your next steps in this process.
Thanks, Imogen. I know for in the essence of time too, we're going to be putting the full report, which goes into so much detail about how we really create this backbone organization that kind of helps move all this collaboration forward, as well as what outlines would be for this potential youth center. So we'll put the full report online. Kaylee, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. There's also an executive summary that's about 4 pages if you just want to hit the high points. That's also available, and we have some of those in hard copies too. So as Imogen was saying earlier, this is a community initiative and a community project, and our role as the foundation is to be that convener, and so we're thrilled to do so. And if anyone is interested in learning more about the things we talked about in the last slide about how we put this council together and what our priorities should be as a community, making sure our youth are at the table the whole time, please reach out to me, and we can spend a couple minutes answering questions. And I know that this has been a lot of information, so I think it'll be helpful for everyone to kind of see the report and get, feel free to reach out afterwards too.
If people want to put their questions in the chat, that would be great. And Carolyn's gonna moderate that a little bit, and then either anybody who's on the project team, we can chip in to see who will answer.
Okay. Well, after everyone has a chance to distill some of this information, we will be emailing you out all of this stuff, and then we will probably be hosting a reconvening in a little while just to answer strictly questions, because we know that, I don't know about you, but I've read this report twice and I've heard the presentation, and I still am reeling with all the possibilities and things that I learned. So please feel free to take that time, jot your questions on, and please come back to us. We'll be reaching out to follow up for sure, but thank you.